Boy, you got quiet. Hi. Good afternoon. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
You know what that means? Happy Shabbat. Have a nice Shabbat. I hope so far, so good. Now listen, I was going to remind Randy, if you have a question, my adorable husband is not trying to get you to be quiet and he's never going to talk to you again. Just be quiet and ask me later, and then there's no later. Oh, there'll be a later. If you have a question that you think might take a few minutes to go into, write it down, because by the time we get to that point, you'll have forgotten it, or you say, I had a question, I don't remember. Write it down. This is what those of us getting older have to do, is write it down, because there is going to be an opportunity to ask questions. Yes, Dan? What does it need to be doing?
We can't hear you. Move your mic over.
I can talk louder.
Turn your mic over.
Over. You mean move I see what you're saying. Okay, and closer to me? No, I can talk louder. How long will you want me to talk? That'll be great. Don't make me use my teacher voice. Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon. Hi. Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to talk about a few things as John and I were putting together what we wanted to say, and because there's only so much we can say in a single day. And what I felt needed to be talked about was sort of almost three different topics. And that makes me nervous, because one of my hang-ups when I have to speak, especially if I'm speaking for a formally religious group as this is that it needs to come out of Scripture. I dislike talking about topics. I like talking about Scripture. And so this put me yesterday, I'm saying to John, oh, honey, I just don't feel good about this. It's not coming to me. I'm not having a good experience with this. And so he assured me that it was great. So I'm just giving you a disclaimer that I'm hoping it's great. I wanted to share with you three important areas, not that you get wrong, because you're all adorable and very smart, and all of your spiritual leaders are just geniuses, and of course they give you only the Word of God, and it's great, so good for you. But we were just in Oregon, and some people in Oregon didn't know this stuff, and in case one or two of you don't know this stuff, I thought I'd share this stuff with you, because the people in Oregon were like deer in headlights. Except for the few that were going, what? Okay. Why did Yeshua come? I'll try to mix up Yeshua and Jesus. I apologize if one or the other of them doesn't help you identify him right away. Why did he come? I think if you asked a cross-section of people in this room or people in your church, they might say the easy answer. And the easy answer is, he came to die. How many of you, that was your first thought? He came to die. Yes? Have you heard people say that? He came to die. Yes, that is true. Except it's not the whole story, is it? Not the whole story. Why did Yeshua come? Why did he die? What's your easy answer? He died to pay for the sins of the people so that people could be saved, whatever that means to you. Saved, they could go to heaven, right? Those are your simple, easy answers. Was it really that simple and easy? Is the theology behind what happened extremely simple and easy to people today? Right? If I have done wrong, say people today, why would somebody else have to die for me? That doesn't seem fair. Just like it doesn't seem fair that animals get killed. They didn't do anything wrong. Why do they have to die? That seems weird. What is wrong with you people? And our job, when they say things like that, or they think them very loudly, like at our office, or somewhere you're riding with somebody and have a chance to chat with them in the grocery store lines. I don't know what you're doing in the grocery store line, but they're hard. They're easy for us to say because we haven't examined them recently, usually, these questions. But they're big questions, and they need to be understood in our own lives before we can ever hope to share what we know to be true in our lives. Is that agreeable to everybody? Have you felt like that? I really don't feel that I'm equipped to really talk about these things. I just rather hang out with people who agree with me. And I think that's a normal, average idea. I wanted to point out 3 different areas that oftentimes Christians don't understand very well. These seem to come out of the Jewish scriptures, and they seem to give a lot more depth and a lot more understanding to what Yeshua came to do and what happened because of what he did. Is that fair? All right, so on my sheet, it's just a single sheet. If you've got one at the top, it says, what did Yeshua really intend to accomplish? He came, why? And if your answer is he came to die, we can talk about that too. So let's start there. Everybody talks about atonement. Nobody does anything about it. What are other words for atonement that you have heard? Theological type words that make you sound smart. Atonement is sacrifice, substitution, expiation. I don't even know what that means. I forgot to look it up in the dictionary before I came. What is atonement? So would it be, pardon? Repentance? Okay. But just the act of atonement. The act of atonement is the process by which, what was the first thing that died before Yeshua came to die? What was the first plan? Something died. What died so that people could have atonement? Animals died so that people could have atonement. And when I was a new believer, this is a very handy saying. Somebody says, if you look at the word atonement, it looks like at one meant. So it really, has anybody else heard that? And so it seems like it's bringing us together as one, which is really a nice, cool, clever thing to say, but what does that mean, two? Okay. So we don't have time to go through the whole entire plan of salvation in the Tanakh or the Old Testament. So we're going to skip to the high points. All right, is that acceptable to everybody? If you have further questions, ask them during question and answers. Write them down. Atonement is the process in the scriptures by which something gives up its life to allow something or someone else to live. That is your technical term, atonement. And if you ask people, they almost always would say it involves death of some kind. Very nice. Now I'm going to ask you to turn to Exodus 30. 30, 11 through 16. Trust me, you have not read these verses. These are verses you don't know very well. And if you were in our congregation last week, you heard this once, but I think you should hear it again because I'll have a pop quiz. It'll be good. You'll enjoy it. Exodus 30, starting in verse 11. This is at the beginning, or actually toward the end of Exodus, and in general, we're talking about establishing and building the tabernacle, which is the place for the Jewish people in the middle of the camp where the Shekinah, Florida, the Shekinah glory, no, Shekinah, the Spirit of God is going to come and live amongst his people there in the tent of meeting, which then becomes, transitions into the tabernacle. And this is the section where it's discussing building the tabernacle and the different things that are in the tabernacle. 30 verse 11, make an altar of acacia wood for burning incense. It is to be a square, a cubit long, and a cubit wide. Do I have this? Okay, so that's number 1. Go down to 11. Then the Lord said to Moses, when you take a census of the Israelites to count them, each one must pay the Lord a ransom for his life at the time he is counted. Then no plague will come on them when you number them. Each one who crosses over to those already counted is to give half a shekel according to the sanctuary shekel, which weighs 20 gerahs. And you can look in your footnotes, should you have any, about how much money that is if you care. The half shekel is an offering to the Lord. All who cross over those 20 years or more are to give an offering to the Lord. The rich are not to give more than half a shekel, and the poor are not to give less when you make the offering to the Lord to atone for your lives. 16, receive the atonement money from the Israelites and use it for the service of the meeting. It will be a memorial for the Israelites before the Lord, making atonement for your lives. This is a discussion that most of us would never read. We'd skip over this part and get to the juicy stuff later on, or talk about the building of the tabernacle. Sabbath is in the next chapter, 31, talks about the eternal covenant of the Sabbath that is the sign, the visible manifestation that God still has an eternal covenant with his people. That's what the importance of the Sabbath is. But we're not even talking about that kind of stuff. We're back to this money. So it says that the money is an atonement, and you should be sitting there going, what? The money is an atonement. It says it over and over again. It's not the only time that in the Tanakh where it says, pay some money, it will be an atonement for you. Well, I thought that had to do with like something really holy and people will have to die or something. Well, if you read other stories throughout the Tanakh, the Old Testament, that talk about when a census was taken, sometimes it's a positively grand idea that God says you should put it into effect, like at the beginning of the book of Numbers. The reason why it's called the book of Numbers is because a census is going to be taken of the number of people that are there before they're going to go and take the promised land. So that census would be fine in that case. A census is also fine in other places where they're planning on going into battle and the commanders need to know how many fighting men that they will have and how many people are on the support team, which is the rest of the families. There's another special time that we'll talk about in a minute. But anyway, the verb that's used here for atonement is, I put this in your notes here, it's the Hebrew verb kpr. I do not have time to go into how the Hebrew verb system works. Let me just tell you this. Meaning in Hebrew words is dependent on the root letters, and there's usually 3 letters. So when we talk about meaning in Hebrew words, we look for the root word, and this 3-letter root means atonement. And it's this 3-letter root that you find here. Now, because there were times later on in the scriptures and probably previous to this time where the taking of a census, especially to count people because you plan on going to war, would be a very bad thing. When a census is not approved by God, then there has to be a payment given by the population. Some of them will die. Ooh, God is strict. But indeed, this payment that they're giving, that is going to be used for supporting the tabernacle, first of all, creating all the beautiful things that were at the tabernacle, supporting the staff of the tabernacle, supporting those who will minister in the tabernacle. This is important. This is the purpose for the money. Only very jaded people would call it a tax. One of the writers I read said, it's an assessment. Okay, a tax. Okay, I get it. But in this case, it indeed does prevent the death of the people who are paying it. And the part we really like when we're reading it in modern America is both the rich and the poor pay exactly the same amount. There's no special favors if you pay more. You don't get better atonement. It's everybody pays the same thing. And that seems to really, we're happy about that sense of fairness that we see there, that you can't bribe your way into the atonement. It's one price fits all. Let's look at another verb that is also used for atonement. In fact, we won't look there. Let me just tell you. There's another 3-letter root for atonement, and it is made up of G-A-L. Those are the 3 letters, so you can see totally different words. Ga'al. And this is sometimes used the words redeem. So I didn't hear redemption, but redemption is also a process within atonement, right? And as I said to my friends in the congregation, nobody uses the word redemption anymore, except it went out with gold stamps and green stamps. We used to redeem the books of stamps, and a lot of us old people remember when that would happen. We'd get thousands and thousands of stamps. We'd paste them in the books. We'd take them to a place, the redemption center, literally it was called that, and then you'd take your books in, and the books would be worth who knows what amount of money. But if you had a certain number of books, what would they do for you? If a toaster was worth toaster, first answer. Mixer, another answer. Anybody else think of things you used to redeem your points for? Not trips to Europe. It was stuff that you put in your kitchen, right, mainly. It was cool. It was like you got it for free. You didn't get it for free. You bought all the groceries, and they gave you pieces of paper, and then you got to redeem them. But redemption means you're giving, instead of money, you're giving books of stamps to get something you really want. That would be a process that human beings generally enjoy. And so redemption, this Gaal, is also a part of atonement, and in some cases is translated as atonement. But it has to do with a different side of it. It has to do with activities. So Gaal, this verb, is used when recounting the various things God did for the people, where God says, I am your God. I will rescue you with my mighty outstretched arm. And some of you might know it better than I can recite it. And I will show you great and mighty wonders. He's introducing them to the concept that he's going to redeem them from Egypt, right? And he's going to do a whole list of wonderful things, and those constitute their redemption. And this is the verb Gaal. But it is yet just another segment of what atonement represents, is it not? If I say to you, you might not know this verb, but if I say to you, this verb is used dozens of times in the book of Ruth about a gentleman named Boaz. In fact, Boaz is called the Goel. He is the Redeemer. And how does he redeem? What is his job? They pay money and then they're in. No, what happens? It's a whole process, isn't it? First of all, he says, I'm not really the most direct person. Read the book of Ruth. Even you guys. I know women are big on Ruth, but there's a lot of guys in there that are cool. So Boaz says, there's a process. We got to go through. It's not filing paperwork, but it's about the same thing. Where you can't just say, I'm marrying you and we get that land. No, that does not work, just like it wouldn't work today. But he does a series of great and selfless actions on Boaz's part to ensure that Ruth and her mother-in-law, especially, that their line continues on. He is the Goel. He is the kinsman who is a redeemer. Okay? So Gael concentrates on various actions. Atonement, kippur, concentrates on a one-time deal that completes the transaction. Because there's two sides to atonement, and there's two sides to this transaction that we talk about with Gaal. It's interesting. Now, I mentioned before, it might make you uneasy that this is money in this case. How many felt icky about that? Because what do we usually think about when I mention the word atonement? Are we thinking about stuff? No, we're thinking about blood, right? Heavy, weighty, not stuff. It's death and really hard, and sacrifice is brought up a lot. But notice in the Hebrew text, that's all kippur. It's all. And so we shouldn't be afraid of understanding the whole realm that we enter into when talking about redemption, expiation, atonement. And just to throw a big subject out so that everybody is on the same page, the animal sacrifice system operated and was successful based on the exchange of life system of atonement. Exchange of life. The animal, which is by definition not sinful, comes and the animal dies in the place of the person who deserves death. The animal gives their life to the person who continues to live, and the animal dies in payment. Does that sound fair? The shorthand version of that is called the exchange of life principle of atonement. If we do not understand the bare bones of that system of atonement, I maintain that we don't understand what Yeshua came to do when we talk about his atoning death. It was already being done, but with animals. Okay? Keep that in the back of your mind. Now, that's very nice. It's very sort of esoteric, but why is it important? Who cares anyway? Use some words. I get it. Oh, it's important. I have 3 times on the sheet why it's important, because it's really important that you understand why it's important, and I'll tell you why. The verb KPR, as I have just discussed with you, means to atone, to ransom by means of a substitute. Is this formal thing? It could be done during kidnappings. It can be done during this situation where they may die if they don't satisfy the conditions for the census. KPR. Except for when you're told this. In Oregon, I said, can anybody tell me what Kippur means? Like in Day of Atonement, Kippur, what does that mean? What does Kippur mean? And what do some of you say? Oh, thank you. Half of them said, cover. What? Did I even say the word cover in what I just said now? I talked for a long time. Where is this? What? Well, because we'll tell you. That is back in Genesis 6. Very simple. We can all turn there. Genesis 6, Noah, you've heard of him. He's building the ark. Well, God's telling him what to do. So Genesis 6:16. Make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Blah, 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 blah. Ark is 450 cubits. Where is it? How come I put 6:16? It's not there now.
16.
14.
Thank you. I did that. I did this late last night. It says, Ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside and out. See, this word here, coat it with pitch, is Kippur. K-P-R. So therefore, Kippur means to coat it with something, to whitewash it, to cover it up, except with pitch it would be black. Painting the ark. So that's what that means, cover. Thank you so much for the sermon on Kippur. What? And yet thousands of Christians are told this by very well-meaning people who really believe it because it is found, doggone it, in Genesis 6. What's going on? Why can't we know what the Bible says? It worries me when I don't know what the Bible says. Well, let's go to English for a moment, shall we? So my background that I study the most in is linguistics, which is how languages work. This is how languages work. In, I would say, almost every single human language, a single word can mean a bunch of different things. The same word in a different context can mean a lot of stuff. And my favorite example is the word fly. Very simple word, F-L-Y, fly. Has about 4.5 meanings, all of which are not correct, and you can't mix them up because they'll contradict each other. What? Well, let's do the verb first. Verb. To fly. To, what would you say?
Soar.
To navigate above the ground on your own power, to travel through the air, to fly. That's your verb form, fly. Noun form. A fly. A buzzing, annoying black thing. that propels itself by flying right by your face and in your ear and all over your picnic food, etc. That's the noun form, an insect. You've got the verb form, the way of propulsion. You've got the noun form, an insect. There is another noun, fly. Just think slacks. The zipper in the front of a pair of slacks. Is it not? Do you call it anything else? It's the fly. And women didn't used to have flies. When I was like 10 years old, women's pants zipped on the side. But after the late 60s, women now have flies on their pants. I don't have fly on these pants, but if you're wearing slacks, you probably have a fly too now. And it's not a masculine thing. So that would be another meaning, another noun. And then if you're hipping with it, you have the fourth one, which is an adjective, where people or things can be described as fly. Is any young person want to enlighten us about what fly is as a description of something? Otherwise, I'll be forced to sing a rock song. If someone calls you fly, say, you're really fly. Do you want to punch them? Or you say thank you? You walk away because they're an idiot? So fly would be good? And what does it mean for all these people here who don't know what that adjective means? Cool and hip and with it and attractive. So if you're calling that guy over there is really fly, you think he's very attractive. And you enjoy looking at him because he's ever so handsome and smart and good looking. He's fly. Now, 4 different words for a 3-letter single word. That's English. All languages have problems like this. So when people say, yes, Genesis, the pitch and covering the ark and making it waterproof, that would be Kippur. So when Jewish people say Yom Kippur, they're just merely talking about covering up their sin. Because we all know that Jesus really takes away the sin. And so those Jewish sacrifices really didn't do too much. Because they're just covering it up. Didn't really deal with it. Has anybody heard people say that kind of stuff? This is usually the way the sermons go. Or the way the Bible studies go. Well, what's the answer to this? All those people who enjoy the meaning that comes out of Genesis should turn to Exodus and enlighten themselves on another meaning for the same root. And the other meaning for this root is to ransom by means of a substitute. It's a lot different than cover, isn't it? Why is it important? Because it really bothers me when I hear the animal sacrifice system being denigrated. It bothers me. Yeshua's sacrifice is different from animal sacrifices in very specific ways, but it's also like animal sacrifices in the sense it provides atonement, and that the people knew their atonement had been secured, whether they're in the Tanakh or whether they're in the New Testament or the New Covenant. It is important what we believe about atonement. It does color what people say, whether they mean to or not, about Jewish people and what they believed and continue to believe. Topic 2. The nature of Yeshua's earthly life and ministries. If we say that the easy answer to the question, why did he come, is he came to die. I heard, there's been, when I was a new believer, back when I was young and adorable, as a young adult, I heard some fantastic little sermonettes and stuff about the manger was made out of wood, and the wood represented a cross, and how many of you have heard stuff on that? Yeah. So it's a little schmaltzy, we like to say, it's a little, tries to grab at your heartstrings. Yes, but he also came to live here, didn't he? The problem is we don't spend a lot of time on the he lived here part, and that's what John was referring to. So if we say, why did he live, is a different question. Why did he live? If he only came to die, why do we have the Gospels? Just get to the good part already. Leave out all this other stuff. It seems to be somebody else's mail anyway, isn't it? It's really for Jews, really, not for us. Some churches say that. Some churches say, this isn't for us. These people weren't really saved. So we need to look beyond this. So we could start reading maybe Paul. That'd be good. Acts, a little iffy. We're not in history, but not too helpful for our spiritual life. Just interesting facts about history doesn't help our spiritual life. Oh, Paul, he tells us how to have a really spiritual life. Funny. Let's look at the book of Luke for a minute. Because I love, as John said, I love using the book of Luke because the buzz about Luke. So if you're trying to quickly go through your average Christian's idea of what the Gospels, who they're aimed at, and who wrote them. So we got Matthew, that's the Jewish Gospel. We got Mark, that's the Roman Gospel. Why? Well, you haven't been indoctrinated with that? Because he sounds like a Roman soldier. Come on, go. There's no Christmas story. It goes right to and Yeshua's out there, preaching and teaching and healing and doing all that stuff. And then Luke, what's the buzz on him? The Gospel's for the Greeks. Yeah, the Gospel's for the Greeks. Interesting, because he has a Greek name. What? Anyway, so, and then what's John? What's the buzz about John? The whole world. It's the Gospel for the whole world. And many hundreds and thousands of people are told, as new believers, they should read the Gospel of John, because it's for the whole world and everybody will understand it. The Gospel that is built around knowledge of the Jewish holidays. And if you don't understand the Jewish holidays, you can't understand this Gospel, would be the Gospel of John. So, although the words seem simple, how many of you have already realized during your lives that it's when the words are simple that it's the hardest to understand? Because just because big words are not used does not mean you're getting what he's talking about. I'm just saying. We have Luke. So Luke is for the Greeks. Really? Well, Luke is an expert writer of Greek. He writes beautifully, perfect Greek. It always is the correct. He has a great vocabulary. He's very, he can do it really easily, it seems. But Luke, first of all, I like it because every time I want to talk about a woman who has an encounter with Yeshua, guess which gospel I look at? Every time. Luke. Luke has them all. Some of the other gospels have other stories about Yeshua and women, but Luke has them all. I like that really much. So Luke 7 and 8, which John sort of alluded to, is part of the center, where it's the center of what Yeshua is teaching while he's here on earth. Okay? And so the way the Gospel of Luke is organized is that there is a theme, but it's not a theme for every chapter in the book, but there's whole sections that have sort of a theme, and the theme can go to be the main topic of the story, or it can go underneath the story and then come up again after we finished with an interruption. Luke is the story of interruptions. What happened when Yeshua was interrupted in the middle of his ministry? Interesting. Because how do people usually respond if they're really into the ministry? Well, how do they respond if somebody interrupts them? They're not thrilled, are they? They get a little crabby. They say, wait over there and be quiet. You're always interrupting. That's not how Yeshua dealt with anybody who interrupted him. It's very interesting. I'll let you think about that later on. But in Luke 7, the middle of his ministry, Luke 7 starts at verse 11. I have here, Yeshua raises a widow's son, right, in the little town of Nain. And if you visit Israel, you can visit Nain, and they have wineries there. It's just a little tiny little place. It's sort of nice. At the end of 7, you have Yeshua is anointed by that woman who he pours out this expensive ointment on his feet. Then you have the parable of the sower. That's an important one. Then you have the healing of a demon-possessed man. All right. So back to what I meant to talk to you about, which was, how come I don't have it here? So it's the one, honey. It's the one that you talked about with the guy.
Except I used the Matthew.
Oh, no wonder I'm confused then. I'm trying to see. I apologize very much. I didn't copy down the correct portion. Here's the deal. The synagogue leader goes to Yeshua. He says, my daughter's dead. Can you please come? I think you can raise her, which is what he said. And Yeshua said, yes, I'll come right now. And he starts walking in the passage. He'll find it while I'm talking. And he's interrupted. He's in the middle of a big crowd. She's in Matthew, and that's fine. You can, if you want to look there, you can look right there. Matthew 9:18. And so he's interrupted because he's in the middle of a giant crowd. And people are jamming in all around him, meaning he's either very popular or he's on the roads when all the snowbirds are there. Either way, it's not an easy situation. He's trying to walk because somebody is dying or has died. See, wouldn't this be the most important thing that you need to keep your eye on if somebody asks you to help them with that? But guess what? Somebody interrupts him. This woman who has her own little problem. Her own little problem is that she's been bleeding. It doesn't specifically say that she's been bleeding from her lady parts, although I think you could assume that's probably where she was bleeding from. And she's been bleeding from there a long time. Thank you. So it was there. I just didn't look far enough. It's in Luke 8:40. And how much time do I have? Okay, we're getting there. 10 minutes. Okay. Oh. Thank you, Shandi. Shout out to Shandi. Because you're not distracted by all these people. Anyway, so it's in Luke 8, starting in verse 40. So this lady who's had a problem for years, why would he interrupt her now? Or why would she interrupt him now? He's got someplace to go. She's had this problem for years. So I'll get back to you, lady. Is that how he deals with her? No. He stops because he feels something happened, doesn't he? And we don't have time to, as my husband liked to say, unpack it like a piece of luggage. He says, something happened. I have to stop. So then his disciples have to stop clearing the way for him because he's going to have an interaction with this woman who's been suffering for years. And what happens through their interaction? She stops bleeding. And Luke says doctors have spent years trying to tell her what was wrong, and they couldn't help her. Meanwhile, tick-tock on the daughter. He has the woman give her testimony. Read it. It says, they stop and they listen to her testimony. Everybody goes, ooh, ah, ooh. Tick-tock in the background. Is this the way you would have responded? We're on call, emergency, come right now, death. He stops. He deals with the need. Then he goes. Now, he gets there, Yeshua gets there, is the girl dead? Yeah, you're too late, Yeshua. How could you do this? Didn't you know what your priorities were? You're too late. What happens? He does raise her, doesn't he? And how does he do it? Little girl, get up. This is exactly the same verb, which is repeated here in Aramaic, that moms use when they tell you to get up in the morning, it's time for school. Little girl, get up. And she gets up. There's a place in Jerusalem right in front of a big department store where there's the ruin left of a very nice small church. In that little, it's like an archway. Nobody looks at it because they're busy waiting to cross the street or going to the big grocery store in the basement or the big department store. And you see written above it says Talita Kumi, which is what Yeshua said to the little girl. And did she get up? She sure did. She sure did, and got up. What do we learn? Is Yeshua impatient? Is he goal-oriented? Is he time-conscious? No, 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 and no. And yet, what are we told often in our society? Time is money, you're wasting time, got to get going, can't just stick around and just chat with all these people who interrupt you. John and I deal with this when we deal with groups. Guess what? This is not the way Yeshua acted. I think that's worth learning. Correct? Maybe his schedule's not mine. Maybe his emergency is not my emergency. Maybe his perfect time for healing is not my perfect time for healing. I'm just saying these are suggestions. Why is this important? Because of our culture. Because of our culture. Because unless we understand the values that are in the Gospels, the values that Yeshua obviously lived by, we don't understand how we should live also. It's important for us because it was important to him. The purpose of Palm Sunday. All right. So somebody tell me what happened on Palm Sunday, but more importantly, why? What was the deal with that?
He was walking as a king.
Yeah, how did people find out? Do we know how people found out? Why was there a crowd? There were, oh, yes, that's a good topic. So that Palm Sunday, that particular day, was the day that was specified that the lambs that were going to be sacrificed for the Passover were literally brought in from the fields in through a specific gate called the sheep gate. You can go there today. And there were pools right there, and those sheep were washed in the pools. The pools are in the area that some of you may know as the pools of Bethesda. I can't talk today. Bethesda, thank you. It's the hospital in Maryland. It's Bethesda. And you can go see those actual pools. They dug down way down below the churches that are there. And they found that water system from the Second Temple period. And it's those pools that the sheep were brought into to clean them and get them ready. They're going to be sacrificed in a couple days. From what we understand about the Jewish calendar that year, that was the day that Yeshua rode in on what? What? What was up with that? He's supposed to come in on a stallion. It's supposed to be great. How about some tanks and some, soldiers marching and, confetti? That'd be good too. That'd be good. Now, he comes in. It says lowly and riding on a donkey, and that should remind you of some messianic prophecy specifically that you might not know if it didn't sort of be connected with Palm Sunday. So he's not he's not a look at me kind of king. He's what? He comes in as what? He's starting to identify with those sheep that are going to be a sacrifice for Passover, isn't he? He's joined them. Okay, and everybody is absolutely thrilled, right? They're using palm branches. What are they using those for? What does that tell you? Why are they doing that? This is how you celebrated the entrance of a king into your city, is you threw palm branches at his feet. I want to tell you that those palm branches did not grow in Jerusalem. What? They did not have that many palm trees in Jerusalem because today they still don't have almost any palm trees in Jerusalem up on the mountain because there's not enough water. Palm trees come from the city of palms that you've also heard of, Jericho. So people in Jerusalem have to get palms from somewhere. So that implies preparation, thought. Possibly there's some kids selling them on the corner if you wanted to buy some palm fronds that were fresh from Jericho. That's the city of date palms. So he comes in, he's not very majestic, he's on a donkey. Ew. What does he have going for him? What's happening? Are they happy with him? And what do they want? Because Hosanna is an actual plea. Hosanna means save us now. It's from various Psalms. It's a plea for the person who is being honored to save them. In much the same attitude, in the same way, Judah Maccabee entered Jerusalem. And what did he proceed to do? He kicked out the enemies, he cleansed the temple, and he renewed his family, renewed the sacrifice at the temple, cleaned it up, made it new. What do you think these people who know the story of Judah Maccabee really well, what do you think they're thinking at this point? Look, he's going to do like Judah Maccabee. It'll be great. And what do they know about Judah Maccabee's family that you probably don't know? Was that his family, although he died at the end, during the war after he cleaned Jerusalem, his family became the kings and queens of Israel after the year 165, which is Hanukkah, when the temple was rededicated, the second temple, and sacrifices were kosher once again at the temple. So, oh look, he's doing just like Judah Maccabee. Oh goody. He's going to get rid of the Roman horrible people, the people in charge of the temple who don't like real people at all. They just like the people who are in charge. And this will be great, so we can't wait. Yay. What happened? Were they insincere? What happened to those people? Really? No idea?
Throw off the Romans.
Excuse me, I didn't hear.
He didn't immediately do that. He didn't
Oh,
immediately
well,
get rid of them
that's a
like
problem
they
for a bunch of them because they had expectations.
Yeah.
In fact, I will say that the disciples had exact the same expectations, didn't they? They did. How do I know that's true? Even up till the end. What does Peter take to Gethsemane?
So
He says, stop everybody, I gotta take something. What's he do? He takes a sword. Because why?
he thought this is the moment.
He's gonna
Do
help,
it.
and they're gonna take over the kingdom, like Judah Maccabee. They're gonna fight him, then they're gonna clean up the temple, and everything will be right with the world. Thank you, God. Okay. And yet we say, well, Peter, what's his problem? Oh, he was trying to fulfill what he knew was gonna happen. Because they all expected it. And then when it didn't happen, is it just the common people who didn't get it because they're like stupid or something? The disciples didn't get it either. How do we know they didn't get it? They all ran away. I'm telling you, if you lived with Yeshua for at least 3.5 years, you ate with him, you slept with him, you walked with him, you were his disciple, you knew him as much as any human being can know him, and you don't understand what exactly he was doing, you're just like the disciples. You are just like them if you think that. They didn't get it either. Why do we think it's so easy to understand his actions? Well, because they were just fickle crowds and they weren't really believers. They wanted him to be king. They were ready. What happened? Is that what he intended to do? No, that's not. He kept hinting, yeah, I didn't come to set up my kingdom in this world. Remember, there's a lot of hints. And even at the end, they still think it's going to be a war of the good guys against the bad guys. We'll win, and Yeshua will be our new king and bring in the kingdom. That was the original meaning of bring in the kingdom. He was going to do it. Did it happen? Why, no.
Not yet.
No, not yet. And then we have a big fight now between those Christians who think, well, it sort of did. Yes, it did. And then those of us who think, no, it really didn't happen yet. But we can talk about that theology a little later. What if the last week went differently? We could make a list of all the events that occurred during that last week of Yeshua's life, the time that he tried to postpone. Remember, his brother said, you need to go to Jerusalem now. And he said, no, I'm going to wait here. And then he waited until the day that the lambs were being brought in through the sheep gate, the lambs who were being prepared to be killed at Passover. Here's my question to you. I've heard this statement. Let's see if you've heard it too. If the Jews had only accepted Jesus as their Messiah, he wouldn't have had to die. This is said, I've read it said in many different books. If Jesus would have come and the Jewish people would have accepted him as the Messiah and King, he would not have had to die. Tell me what's wrong with that statement.
It didn't come with
He came to die. What? Those are the same people who say that. Well, he came to die.
It was the last sacrifice.
He was the last sacrifice, so what does that mean?
He
He had to die. It wasn't like, oops, the Jewish people blew it. That's really what that statement is saying. The Jewish people were so stupid or so fickle that Jesus had to die. If only they would have accepted him as king, then we're going on to the kingdom right now. No death, no suffering, we're in charge, it's a great life. Except that contradicts exactly what people say. He came to die. And oops, God wasn't watching, and that's when they captured him and killed him? So that was a mistake. What did he say about it? I laid down my life from my own volition, right? Didn't he? Sure, it's easy for me to say now, but think about it, because that thought, which we see in various ways, I choose to go to death. He says, I don't want to. That's what he says in Gethsemane. I do not want to do this, but I will. So it wasn't a mistake that he died. It was not plan B because Jews were stupid and didn't make him the king and then everything would have been great. He came and he gave up his life willingly. And where is that verse? He could have called 10,000 angels to come. He didn't need just Peter and the knife. He needed some big time help. He did not call that help because that's not what he intended to do. There was no oops. There was no mistake. This was not plan B. This was not, oh, we got to clean up the mess now. This was not understood by his closest friends and associates. They were afraid. They ran away. I need to finish my part, but I highly recommend to you to read the Hallel Psalms. They're Psalms 108 to 115. 113 to 118. I highly recommend you read those because they would have been said at the last Passover. And I highly recommend you read 2 Samuel 15 and Luke 23. Because it shows you how Yeshua and the story that he experienced that Luke is trying to tell us is related, it's interlaced with David's story. We don't see much about Yeshua that is David, but I'm telling you, the people of that time did. And they keep telling us because they keep putting in details that are exactly stuff that happened with David. Why would they do that? Because they saw in Yeshua David. And what did David do? He ruled. And was he a great king? The greatest king ever. And did David love his people? Loved his people. But there's interlacing between what Yeshua came to do and what happened in David's life. It's worth it to take a little time. You will get a blessing. It's time for another hafsacha, which means break. Break time. Thank you for your patience. Please go out, go in the fresh air, enjoy, walk around, get some chat with some people. Is that me giving these? Oh, that's cheers.
Yeah, it's cheers.